Okay, so we're starting our new unit on homeostasis. So to start the unit, we're just going to go over your basic definition. Now, I will have this PowerPoint for you on the D2L, but you might want to watch the lesson at the same time because not all of it is going to be included. It's a rather long one. And I just use bits and pieces of it. But we're going to start with the definition of homeostasis. So hopefully that little video helped you understand what homeostasis is. This definition is, it's wordy. The physiological state of the body in which the internal physical and chemical conditions are maintained within an acceptable range that is suitable for essential biological processes. Okay, so certainly take it down. You know me, I'm not much for memorize this and provide me the definition. What I want you to do is understand what it is. So basically, our body has to maintain certain conditions to stay alive. It just certain things have to be kept exactly right, or within a very narrow range. Okay, so the main things we need to take care of. Well, we need blood sugar to be regulated. Okay, so we need to have the right amount of energy so all our endergonic chemical reactions can happen. So blood sugar levels have to be regulated for sure for survival. And we need to maintain temperature. And we need to maintain our pH. Okay? And temperature and pH, so keeping those within a narrow range is important for one specific reason. And if you remember back to our very first unit when we were in school and we talked about macromolecules and enzymes, and we did a lab with the cow liver, temperature and pH have to be maintained at a very narrow level because we need our enzymes to work. Okay? And our enzymes denature, if you remember, because they are proteins. With high temperatures, their efficiency, the rate at which they can make chemical reactions happen, is much reduced with really cold temperatures, and anything too acidic or basic will also denature the enzymes. And if you remember, you're just a big bag of water with all these chemical reactions happening. And what is making those chemical reactions happen is the enzymes. The chemical reactions have to happen quickly to maintain that, huge complex organism which you are. So basically, homeostasis is about keeping our blood sugar levels right, our temperature right, our pH right, so we chemically react and have the energy to chemically react. Now, it does encompass three different systems, which we're going to look at. Overall, there's more that contribute to this, but the three main systems that we're going to be looking at are the nervous system and the endocrine system and the excretory system. Okay, and we're going to look at them in that order. Our cells have to communicate with each other. We're a big organism made up of hundreds of trillions of cells that are working together. So communicating is the key here. So we can communicate electrically through our nervous system. We can communicate chemically through our endocrine system. And of course, the excretory system helps to regulate things like pH and blood sugar levels because it allows us to get rid of substances. So we're going to start with just what is regulation. That's the process by which cells and organisms respond to changes in and around them. So mainly controlled by the nervous and endocrine systems. and they allow us to adjust to internal as well as external environmental changes. So homeostasis is, here's the three things we were talking about. Homeostasis is a tendency of the body to maintain a relatively constant internal environment. We like our temperature to be around 37 degrees Celsius, 0.1% blood sugar, and blood pH of 7.35. So we do not want to vary from that range very much. Okay, we want to keep it really narrow in that range. Homeostasis is disturbed continually and is maintained using feedback systems. So, this is always being disturbed. Obviously, the temperatures around us are constantly fluctuating. We have very acidic diets, so we're constantly messing with our pH by eating acidic foods. And obviously, we're messing with our blood sugar. Every time we eat, you're messing with your blood sugar, but depending on what you're eating, you can really mess with your blood sugar levels, you know, which is why we should avoid eating, a box of Lucky Charms all at once, right? You don't want to be dousing yourself in sugar that way. It's hard to regain homeostasis. Your body can do it, but you're really making it work. So the way this works is feedback systems. So a feedback system has three components. So a sensor. And tomorrow I'll give you a little video on the senses. So, we're going to talk about all the different senses we use. But we need sensors, and sensors are body structures that detect changes in internal, usually within the extracellular fluid or the fluid that's floating around that our cells are bathed in, or external environment. So there are obviously we can detect changes in our external environment through our senses. And what happens is a signal is then sent from the sensor to the integrator. Now, the integrator is where this information is processed. For the most part, that information is going to be processed in your brain. Okay? And in the case of things like reflexes, in your spinal cord. So it's going to receive information from the sensor, and it compares it with optimal functioning conditions, what we call set points. And if the condition is outside of the set point, it sends a signal to the effector. So, your brain takes in this information and differentiates. Is it within this range or not? And if it isn't, it's going to send signals out to remedy the problem. So it will send signals to effectors. So the effector is the body structure that receives signals from the integrator and responds, and it results in a change to an internal variable. Okay, we're going to look at some examples of this. So right off the get-go, we can see how glucose levels are controlled by the endocrine and nervous systems, and we are going to be looking at this in such detail later. So this is just a quick overview of, obviously there's regulating going on here. So they're comparing the blood sugar levels of a person who just ate cereal, breakfast cereal, which tends to have a lot of sugar in it. And remember, if not sugars, cereal is, starch. And so when you eat that, again, it's just broken down into sugar anyway, because it's just a bunch of glucose linked together. And then they're looking at Slim Fast, which I don't even know if it still exists. This used to be a shake people drank to lose weight instead of eating. Yeah. I just think it was generally very unsatisfying to try and drink something, and it probably left you still wanting some food. So I don't know if it's a thing anymore. And the control is someone who hasn't eaten at all. So when we look at these three situations, you can see that after eating, blood sugar levels go up, but then the body goes through a whole series of events to regulate it or bring it back under control. And you're going to learn all about these events. But then the body brings it back under control. In this case, it even dips below before it comes back up. Now, interestingly enough, if you don't eat, your body still has to maintain a steady state. So here, this person didn't eat, so their blood sugar levels go down. And then this is processed in the brain, and signals are sent out to remedy the situation or increase blood sugar levels so that we're back into homeostasis. So you may remember we have glycogen stores. So we're going to go through the details of all this later. But just so you can see that at a very simple system, we have the three parts. The change is sensed, a signal is sent to the brain, it's processed, and then there is an effect that happens. In this case, the effect is the lowering of the blood glucose levels or the increasing of the blood glucose levels in the case of the person that did not eat. So a negative feedback system works by a sensor detecting a change that disrupts a balanced state, signals the integrator, and the integrator activates an effector which reverses, okay? So negative feedback systems are antagonistic. So they do the opposite of what is making the change. Most of the feedback systems in living organisms by far are negative feedback systems. So this is the important one. We're going to be looking at negative feedback systems over and over again. And there's really only a couple examples of positive. So very common in the human body. If you want to have a little diagram of how that works, there's one there. Now, a positive feedback system works in the opposite way. So that is moving from a controlled variable, moving the controlled variable even further away from a steady state. It strengthens or increases the change in the variable. So you're moving away from homeostasis, and in a positive feedback system, it keeps working to move farther and farther away from homeostasis. And again, this is not very common. We're trying to usually, bring everything back to that set point, not veer off of the set point. But a good example of a positive feedback system is contractions which regulate childbirth. So in this case, the pressing of the baby's head on the cervix stimulates the sensors that send impulses to the brain. That releases a hormone, which we're going to make friends with in a little while, called oxytocin, which causes the uterus muscles to contract. Okay, so uterus muscles contracting harder and harder and harder is obviously moving away from the set point where your uterus muscles are not contracting. However, this is required. It's required to keep moving and away and away and away from that set point until the baby is birthed or born, and then it'll stop. So the oxytocin is what makes the uterus contract harder, and the harder the baby presses, the more oxytocin is released, and so we just are moving farther and farther from that set point. We're going to not go through that. So I want you to do this. So thermoregulation, I want you to draw a flow chart summarizing the events that occur in your body in response to both cold and warm temperatures. Okay, so it's just a flow chart that I want you to do. They have an example of one in the textbook. If you want to use the online textbook, you can just actually Google search this. You'll get all kinds of wonderful options for flow charts summarizing temperature control in the body. So I'll have you do that. And then, yeah, answer this question. Reading, not so much. Okay, so I'll leave that with you, and then we'll move on.